Okay, welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to talk about blending modes in Photoshop. This will be part one of a two-part lecture series involving blending modes and how they work and how to use them. So I've got Photoshop open here, and for now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do what we always do and create a brand new document from scratch by clicking on the Create New button. For this one, let's go to, these are the recent ones that I've used. Let's go to photo, and we'll just create a landscape 5x7-inch document. This gives us a blank document. If you ever have these panels like this one that I have right here, the properties panel, floating in your way, you can get rid of them just by hitting this little double arrow, and that will collapse them into their panel icon right over there. And it'll pop back up whenever we need it to. If you can't hear it in my voice, I'm a little under the weather, so I apologize for sounding a little bit nasal for this video. So please bear with me. Allergies are not fun. Okay, so blending modes. Let's get a couple items on our screen here. I'm going to switch and hold over to my ellipse tool, which is down here at the bottom of our toolbar. It allows me to make ovals, ellipses, or perfect circles if I would like. Up here in my options bar, you can see that when I selected this tool, I got a couple of different abilities there to modify how I create these shapes. We'll talk about this stuff in depth later on, but let's go ahead and get a basic understanding of it. Fill and stroke, these both deal with colors. Fill is the inside color of your shape, and then stroke is the color around the edge or the outline of your shape. So currently my fill color is black. I'm going to change that to red, and my stroke is nothing. Nothing is represented by the white rectangle with the red line through it. And I do want to have nothing as my stroke, so I'm just going to have a red circle. So I've got my elliptical marquee, my ellipse tool selected, and I'm painting. It's going to make a red circle. So if I click and drag, you can see that I start to make an oval here, but if I hold shift, it will force it to be a perfect circle. So I'll go ahead and let go, and that jumps up right there. If I didn't like that color, I could still come up here and click in the fill box to change it, or over here in the shape details, or I could even double click the thumbnail, the layer thumbnail down there to pull that up and change it there. But I do want to leave this as just a stark red. I'm going to now go and make another shape, and I'm going to hold out shift and make another perfect circle there. And this time I'm going to make this one a different color. This time I'll click in the color and under shape details in the properties panel, and we'll make this one green. And we'll collapse this little properties panel now. Okay, we'll make one more, and I'll bet you already know what color this one's going to be if you know anything about digital images. And this one is actually going to be blue, but I want you to notice one thing. When I made this shape, it put it in the same layer, and what I actually want is I want to put it in a new layer. So I'm going to click on my background tool and start that again, holding shift to make sure it's perfect. There's other ways to do that too, but that's the one I'm going to do. And this time we will change the color of this one by double-clicking over here, and we will make it blue. Now the fun part about the swatches that are up here under fill is that this is like the perfect shade of blue that I want. But if I did it this way, I'm kind of just clicking and dragging a little bit until I can find it. I can search through my color libraries, but I'm just going to stick with this straight up blue for now. So I've got red, green, and blue all added to my document, aka also known as RGB. All digital images are made up of combinations of these colors. If you take a picture with your digital camera, it will create all the different millions of colors that are in that document by combining different shades and hues of red, green, and blue. Okay, so we've got 3 different layers here, 3 different ellipses, and then I've got my background layer. We're going to just poke out the eyeball of our background layer so it doesn't interfere with what we're doing, because what we're doing is messing around with blending modes. Your blending modes are found in your layers panel, right here where it says normal underneath your layers panel. If I click on that, I see this long list of different words that pops up, and these are all of my different blending modes. They're arranged in a specific way. In Canvas, you can see the different ways that they're arranged, but very quickly, it's just these ones all deal with darkening, these deal with lightening, these deal with kind of contrasting, these are the fun ones, and then these last ones deal with color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this one to screen. That was for my green one. I'm going to select the red one. We'll also change that one to screen, and then we will select our blue one, and we'll change that one to screen as well. Now, I didn't see any changes when I changed the blending modes of all three of these circles here, and that's because what blending modes do is they change how one layer interacts with the layer that's underneath it. Now, in order for that to work, your layers have to overlap some, and in this case, I have three circles and they're not touching at all. But if I take this one, I'm going to select the green one by clicking on that layer, go to my Move tool, and click and drag. I'm going to put it right over here in the middle. We'll kind of intersect with the blue there a little bit. You can see where it overlaps, we get a change here. If you know more about color and digital images, you would know what this color actually is, which is cyan. Because when we have these two overlapping, green and blue, we get that cyan color. Now, if I change this back to normal, we don't see that interaction at all. And if I change it to something else like darken or color burn, you can see that it interacts with it in different ways. But we're going to stick with screen. We'll go to our red one, go to our Move tool again, and move it over there too. Let's go to our blue one and kind of just shift it all over there. Let's zoom in with Control Plus so we can kind of see what we're dealing with. So here are my different shapes, and they're all interacting with each other based on the screen blending mode. It's kind of canceling out and seeing the colors that are in between. Now, if I change one back to normal, you can see that it covers it up completely, but if I change this one back to screen, you can see that they interact with each other in that specific way. Okay, next up, we're going to open a different image in Photoshop. I have an existing image right here that I'm just going to drag and drop right into Photoshop, which will open it right up into its own document. Okay, so once again, blending modes. First, let's just go ahead and we will throw on a black and white adjustment layer to this image to make it black and white. We'll hit the auto button to get what Photoshop thinks is the best black and white color settings for this particular image, and then we will collapse our properties panel. Okay, so I'm going to make a blank layer right here, and in this blank layer, I am going to use my brush tool, and we'll select a color. We can just select red, and I'm going to paint. Now, wherever I paint red in this picture, it just shows up. It kind of covers up the image beneath it. And if I change that to blue or something like that, you can see that it will do the same exact thing. We're just painting over the image that's beneath it. Now, if I change the blending mode of this layer, let's go over to darken. You can see that it darkens the layer that's underneath it. If we see multiply, it still darkens. Lighten will lighten it. Screen does that. But if I just go down to color, you can see that it just adds the color from this layer where I used my brush tool to add some color into it onto the background layer below it. If I get rid of the black and white, it's still pretty much there and looks pretty much the same, but there's a slight change that you can see, mostly in contrast. If I thought that effect was too much, I could knock the opacity down a little bit just to add a little bit of color. Let's poke out that one and we'll do another one. Another blank layer. This time, instead of using my brush tool, I'm going to go to my gradient tool, and we will click over here in the options bar to see all of our different gradients. I'm going to do a rainbow gradient, click and drag all the way down to the bottom and let go. So here we have our nice little rainbow. And if I click the blending modes just by clicking where it says normal and the scrolling down all the way to the bottom, and we're just going to click on color, you can see that it just automatically applies that color adjustment to this image. If I thought it was too much, I could knock down the opacity. The opacity is how visible that layer is, how transparent it is on top of the other one. So both of these, your blending modes and your opacity, deal with blending one layer on top of another layer. Let's stop and close this one out. Okay, now let's see how we can use blending modes in a real-world situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag an image into Photoshop. You can see, let's get rid of these little lines for you. Collapse the properties panel. We have a little bit of a skylight view looking up into the sky through a different structure. And, interesting, got some shapes to it, but however, it could use a little bit more interest or a focal point to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use blending modes in order to add a cloud kind of floating through the sky above us. So I'm going to go to File, we'll go down to Place Embedded, wait for that to pull up, and we will pull up our example pictures. I already have a cloud that I saved from Google, saved and ready to use. So I'll hit File, Place, and we will size that down. We'll put it where we want it to go. And we'll hit this check mark to confirm or to commit our change. And of course, that looks really, really bad. So we've got a cloud that's just kind of floating right through it against a dark, dark blue background. Now, beneath that, we have our background layer with a light blue sky. So what we want to do is we want to adjust this cloud layer to get rid of the dark blue background, but maintain the cloud, and then make it just kind of look as if the cloud's just floating there in the original picture. So Photoshop has different ways you could do this. You could use selections or masking in order to do this, but what we're going to do is use blending modes to try it a different way. So I'm going to click our blending modes where it says normal. By the way, if you just click one and then use your arrow keys, you can cycle through the others, but we're going to click on Lighten. And what that does is it lightens the layer beneath it with what was lighter than that blue that's over it right there. So the dark blue, let's change this back to normal. This background is all darker than this color blue. So when we change it to lighten, it just completely disappeared because we couldn't lighten this up any more than it already was. If we change it to something like lighter color, you can see that it does that. Overlay will do this. They all interact with it in different ways depending on what you select, but we're just going to go with lighten, and it gets rid of it pretty good. You can see that it adds in some reddish, pinkish hues to it, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it does an okay job for what we need. An easy way to make this composite, by the way, a composite is a blend of one or more pictures together. We created our composite using blending modes. To make our composite look a little bit more realistic, we could add in, we could stack a couple of adjustment layers on top of it. Whenever you do this, it applies adjustments to both pictures, both our cloud in this case and our background. And because we're making that same color adjustment to both of them, it makes the blend look a little bit more realistic. That's it for now. We'll check back in and see some more in-depth things that we can do in blend modes here in our